Brad Buxer, if you would accompany me, everything would be great.
Brad, what they gonna do? Doggone! Brad!
In this video, I interview Michael Jackson's longtime songwriter, producer, and musician, Brad Buxer. We cover everything, whether it's being Michael's right-hand man and writing songs together, or what it's like touring the world and working on short films with the King of Pop. Stay tuned here on Mad Jackson Dance. I mean, after working with the likes of Smokey Robinson and Stevie Wonder, you joined Michael Jackson's team in 1989. So I was curious, whilst working with Michael, did you feel any sort of pressure to be perfect? Like, your role was to kind of translate the music in Michael's mind into actual tangible music.
Yeah,
surely
there's
that was
no
like
pressure.
quite a responsibility.
No pressure at all.
Really?
I'd already been in Stevie Wonder's band, touring with Stevie for since '86, right? And I started working on Stevie's records in '85. And so when Billy Bottrell called me in to start working with Michael in '89, right? We hit it off immediately. I was programming drums on his red Lynn drum machine, and the session was magical, and he was smiling at me, and we were laughing, and it was just perfect. Remember, it's just a tiny little group. I don't know who the assistant engineer was. It may have been Matt Forger. But there was Billy Bottrell, the producer and engineer, and there's Michael and there's me, right? And we're in the control room. And it was completely, the musical chemistry was instant, and there was no pressure whatsoever. So I remember the only time I've ever been starstruck in my life is when I'm walking up to the main studio, to the control room. And this is at Westlake, and there's double glass, right? And I look through there, and there's Michael. It's 1989, so it's he's at the very height of everything, right? And peak of his success, and he's wearing a hat, and he just looks like the biggest star in the world, which he was. And I got a big smile on my face because that's the only time I've ever been starstruck. I think all of it. I think the whole stardom thing's a little weird, ridiculous. It doesn't mean anything to me except that one time seeing Michael for the first time because of his stature, how big a star he was. So we start the session, and the session goes beautifully. And I got called back and kept doing more and more sessions. And I think one of the earliest sessions, when he found out I was in Stevie Wonder's band, he took me back to the piano, and an hour and a half later, Heal the World was done, right? And he had the melody for that.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow. But I figured out all the chords and wrote the chords for the bridge, which is no big deal. But that's what an arranger does. But again, there was no pressure to be perfect or anything. It was just a natural flow. It's like he sang the lines, and I figured out the chords. And it's like really relaxed and easy.
Yeah. How long would that take then to find exactly what Michael was looking for? Just in general.
That's some songs took longer. Childhood took about 2.5 hours. Which was longer than normal. Who Is It happened immediately. Will You Be There happened pretty much in the first few minutes, where it's just me and him. But Heal the World was an hour and a half. And
so it's
when
not
we were done with it,
a long process.
What's that?
So it's not like a long process, of days trying to figure it out. It's that instant.
Yeah, no, you'll spend a long time developing the songs, right? Yeah. But the initial, when we did Stranger in Moscow, it took an hour and a half. The whole song was done. So it doesn't mean that you're not going to spend up to a year or more developing it to make a record out of it. But the song itself is born from end to end, from beginning to end, very quickly. And that's the way it always was working with him. There was never any pressure to be perfect. It just worked. No pressure at all.
Wow, that's crazy to comprehend, how kind of quickly that
it was just a pure coincidence that musically we hit it off completely. He loves the R&B chords of Stevie Wonder, and that's what I do. I've always just done the Motown stuff, the R&B, right? That's what I've always loved. It just it was a complete musical synergy. It was stronger and more natural than anything I've ever had in my life, and that's why he kept me around for 2 decades doing all his touring and all his songs when he would do a song from scratch. It was just me and him. So just a natural musical chemistry that you can't wish for or you can't try to make happen. In this case, it just absolutely was the most fluid thing in the world. You know.
Yeah, just
It's
like
funny
the
because
perfect
not
match.
to jump ahead, but we'll come back to things. But the best stuff him and I ever did was 15 years later in 2004. You know,
Really?
before his trial, everything stopped in 2005. But we did "Beautiful Girl," "Days of Gloucestershire," "The Loser," "In the Back." I mean, it's the best stuff that I think we've ever done together. And so, rather than after 15 years of going stale, it was magical. It was
like it just got better and better.
better and better. Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, the music speaks for itself. "Beautiful Girl" is a masterpiece. "In the Back" is a masterpiece. It speaks for itself. Yeah. The Way You Love Me.
It's incredible. So kind of powerful and emotional as well.
It's just great songs. Yeah.
So as Michael would kind of explain and develop the song, would he ever describe any visuals? Because like to me, I like the songs are so closely linked to the short
films. It's a great
question.
It's a great question.
You know,
we never once had a discussion not only about style or tempo or direction. There was never a conversation about anything. He'd just say, "Start playing something," or he'd say, "I have an idea in mind," and we just start doing it. There was never a single rule that he set up that I had to follow ever. Nothing. And that's the beauty of working with him, because if you're working with a writer and they say, "Now I want it to be slow in 3/4 time, I want it to be like, you know, this type of band," it's like you can't think straight with these rules. There was never any direction whatsoever. In fact, we would talk about everything else but the music. We just did the music. And we'd have a ball. I'd say, he goes, "Now let's do some strings." I go, "Now I want you to be quiet and you just let me do this. You're going to love it." And he'd laugh. And you can't say that if you're not going to be able to deliver, but he knew I could always do it. He knew I knew what to do. So I'd do it and he'd have a huge smile on his face. And that's the way the sessions would go. They were joyful, incredibly wonderful. There's not one time we ever got together to build a song where we got stuck. Not one time ever in 2 decades. So
that's remarkable. How about like dance wise? You know, would he sort of dance in the studio, or would he want like a certain type of like funkiness?
With Who Is It, with Stranger Moscow, he would beatbox the drums, right? And then I'd take the beatbox and chop it up and put it on the emulator and split up the sounds and make them real short. We can go into all that later. But so that way, when I was making the drums, it was actually what is directing in his head. Because when you're beatboxing, even though he wasn't the best beatboxer, he was good enough to where I could see exactly what he was feeling drum-wise, because he's singing it. There's no more intuitive way to get a part out of somebody's head rather than they just sing it. And then I literally made the drums out of his sounds. Like I didn't, in Stranger Moscow, I used a 909 kick on the downbeat with the 8th note echo, but everything else, all that percussion, is just his actual beatbox, but where I treat the sound. I make them as short as possible, spike them out at 2K. You know, he always liked sounds that that hurt. That, you know, that he hated reverb. It had to be dry and in your face. And so, but yeah, that's how we would do a lot of this stuff. So,
Wow. So like, surely, you know, especially with the beatboxing and, you know, some of the vocals, did you ever have kind of like a Goosebumps moment when you were creating with Michael? You know, like a big emotional impact or anything?
Not Goosebump moment. I mean, the songs just came together. It's like, In the Back is gloriously rich rhythmically and the coolest thing on the planet. But was there a Goosebump moment? No, it's just like, it was a continuous evolution of a song becoming great. You know, he, a lot of times he wouldn't put a vocal on something until it was almost done, which is very strange. Most of the time at the demo stage, you'll have a vocal. Now with Heal the World, I built the chords off the vocal. With Will You Be There, I built the chords off the vocal. But with Black or White, we had no idea what the melody was going to be until the very end of the development. In fact, he was scribbling the lyrics 20 minutes before he was about to sing it, which was like one of the last sessions for that track. So his philosophy was let the music stand up on its own, right? And there'd be different different amounts of delay in the vocals. Sometimes the vocal would happen early on, meaning it dictated what the chords were, and sometimes there wasn't a melody at all, and you just be building a track. So it just really depended. But since there was never any pressure, it's just very organic, and it worked.
Definitely.
It's one of those things that if it hadn't have worked, I wouldn't have been in the room. First of all, I wouldn't have been kept getting called back. It did work, and that's why I was in the room, and that's why I was always there with him. Just it was a perfect combination. He doesn't play any instruments, so you had a question about some people were saying, but he plays no instruments. I know the guy better than anybody, Red. I know him better than anyone on the planet. He doesn't play an instrument, period.
So not even like reading sheet music or anything?
No.
Wow.
No, he doesn't read at all. No.
It's really interesting the way like he was so sort of talented and musically powerful, but he didn't have that sort of traditional.
I mean, it may have been a blessing.
Yeah.
You know, rather than being too analytical, he just felt stuff. You know, just he on Billie Jean, for instance, where I wasn't around for that. The story goes that he actually, you know, those are just triads. It's an F sharp, right? F sharp minor. So he had the idea for the chords, and I imagine he sang lines to the people helping him do that. That was before my time, right? I wasn't around till '89, so I can't pretend to know how that came about. But I know he was the only one trying to develop that song. I don't think Quincy wanted it on the album, and I think he didn't get support from anyone. And then Nelson Hayes, his driver, was driving Michael somewhere, and he goes, "You know, that song's a badass song." And because of what Nelson said, Michael decided to push it through and get the song on the album. Billie Jean's one of the greatest songs Michael's ever done. So he was magically talented as a dancer, a singer, a songwriter, everything. And I think that had he been trained, you know, might have messed that up. You know, he was better rhythmically than just about like on In the Back. The verses are, you know, like on the Police stuff, you'll have a reggae verse and a rock chorus, right? And reggae is usually where the 1 and 3 and 2 and 4 reverse. So the snare would be on the 1 and 3 and da 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 da. So
got it.
Michael, and In the Back, the verses are completely turned around rhythmically by 2 beats, right? And it's genius, right? And he didn't need to do that. It's just what he felt, right? But it's very clever. And it wasn't something he set out to be clever on. It's just what flowed out of him.
Yeah,
and
it's just completely organic.
Yeah, and there's a phone call where he's calling me, and Michael Prince and I play it at some of the seminars we do, where he's talking to me for 3 or 4 minutes on the phone, you know, beatboxing, giving me ideas, telling me he wants this and this. And he's pretty aggressive sometimes when he wants something. It's not like, really? Brad, how are you feeling? It's like, this is what I want.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense. So, you know, I say a couple words to the phone call, like, okay, got it, or stuff like that. But, you know, in the end, I just had a phone call, you know, and recorded it, and then built the song around that phone call.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, you know the phone call at the start of The Way You Love Me on the Michael album? Is that Michael calling you that?
I'd have to hear it. I don't remember.
Right, okay.
But I mean, I
developed explaining the whole melody.
The Way You Love Me was originally called Hanson, right? You know, we had alternate titles for stuff. Yeah. And so we worked up that song from scratch, and I'd have to listen to it to see exactly what phone call you're talking about. But I was the one who did the song with him. There wasn't anyone else that did the song with him. It's just me.
All right.
Just the two of them. Yeah, it must have been. Yeah. I'd have to hear it, though. Yeah.
What other, like, alternative titles did you have?
One song we called That. THAT, you know.
Yeah. Just like completely random things then.
Yeah, completely random. Yeah, until there was a title, right? Yeah, so just weird stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you have any sort of particularly personal links to any of the songs that you worked with Michael?
Yeah, 2 of the songs he wrote about relationships that I was in. And
really?
One of them is Days of Gloucestershire, and
it talks about one.
Gorgeous song. And it's funny because we had already done all the music, and I had to go to LA for a couple of days to do something. And so I set Michael Prince up to record the vocals, right? Michael Prince is, you know who Michael Prince is. So I'm very close to Michael Prince. So he comes up there, and so 2 days later, I go back to the ranch, right? And we did the music in the dance studio. There was no formal studio. We had all my equipment in road cases, right? Called it an HRS system, hotel room system. And so when I heard the lyrics, I'm in the bungalow, right? In the guest house, right outside the main house. And I called him on the phone and I was just hysterically crying. You know, it's like he had captured everything I've been going through he knew I was going through a really bad breakup. He had captured it completely with the lyrics, you know, and he wrote the song about hold me like you used to really hold me in the summer days of Gloucestershire. Just broke my heart, you know, and unbelievable. And yeah, that was one of the most emotional times I've ever had with anything having to do with him. And then the other track that he did was when I was in Vegas. This is 2003, and I was, you know, it was that same relationship, and I was calling myself a loser at the top of my, you know, screaming it in my room because I was really upset, and he could hear it down the hall, and so he wrote, that's how the loser came to be. Yeah. And so those, in answer to the question, those two songs were written about my life experiences. Now, another song he did with John Baylor, or Tom Baylor, I forget, one of the Baylors, where either one of the Baylors is going through a divorce, and that became She's Out of My Life.
Yeah, Tom Baylor. Yeah,
Tom Baylor. Yeah. So yeah, his life was pretty strange because he was so, I don't know if sheltered is the word, but he would see things through other people's experiences because he wasn't able to have normal experiences, right? And so he would just see how the common person, you know, what was going on in their life. And I was around him constantly. I was either up at the ranch, or we'd be living at the top of the Four Seasons Hotel in New York for a year, or we'd be at Criterion Studios in Florida, or we'd be at Hit Factory in New York, or Sony in New York, or we'd be on tour, right? So I was with him constantly. And so he was around. We were with each other constantly. So I guess what I'm saying is that we're 3 months apart in age. I was born in May. He was born in August. Same year, 1958. And you know, we had two relationships. We were like best friends. Like Frank Cascio says, Frank Cascio was Michael's other best friend, right?
Yeah.
And Frank Cascio says, Brad, but you had two relationships with him. You had the friendship, but you also had the musical relationship. And I did. You know, and the way Michael works is he doesn't like to have a bunch of people around him. So if you're able to do a bunch of things, wear a bunch of hats, you'll be around. And I was able to wear a bunch of hats. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. He was a blast. He was so much fun. We had so much fun.
I can imagine. Must be such sort of like just fond memories to look back on.
Yeah, I have dreams about him. I dream when I'm up at the ranch, can do anything I want at the ranch. Bring my motorcycle up there, and you know, nobody's up there. It's just Grace, the kids, staff, me and Michael, and riding my motorcycle around with my dirt bike around the pool, or going into the game room, or you know, I would bring my Mercedes up there and he would drive it, and then I drive his smart car, and it was like two kids in a great big playhouse. It was just a lot of fun. It was wonderful. Wow. And we got to work that. It was all based around doing music, right? It was always based around getting stuff done. Like there's no fun if you're not getting stuff done for him, right? You got to perform for him.
Right.
So that's why we have
sort of best of both worlds there.
Yeah, that's why we have so many songs that we did together.
Right.
You know, we have like over 40 songs we've done together. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. One of those songs that you played a key role in was Stranger in Moscow. Can you just talk to me a bit about the creation of the song, please? And is there a reason that you don't have a writing credit on it?
Because he took the credit. So, which, as far as how do I feel about that, I don't like it. But he's done so many good things in my life that you have to decide if you're going to like be angry about something or just say, well, I had the best 21 years with him that I have with anybody, and life's not perfect, so it's okay, you know. So here's how Stranger in Moscow happened. We're in Moscow doing concerts, right? And this was when he was getting his allegations, right? And he was really depressed. And so I was doing all the music for the Sonic the Hedgehog thing because he had decided he was going to do it, and then he says, "You do it, Brad." And so I had done 41 cues back in LA with Matt Forger and some other people I brought in. So back
he
then,
didn't really work on them?
huh?
So he didn't really work on those cues?
He worked on one cue.
Right.
He worked on one cue with me. But, I mean, Jam's in there. You know, I put Stranger in Moscow in there because I had written the cue for the verse before we ever came up with the song. And, and he approved everything I did and loved it. But no, he worked on one cue. But since they use Jam and other things, you know, his influences in there with other stuff. But he calls me over to his hotel room, and typically B party is the band and A party is Michael and security. And A party typically stays at a different hotel. So anyway, knock on his door, and there's a room with an upright piano, right? And he's pretty depressed, and he just says start playing something. And so I played a bunch of things, and finally I played the cue I had done for Sega, right? But I played it much differently, but the chords are identical, the top notes are identical. It's E flat triad, and then D flat triad add 9, the E flat stays on top, and then F sharp triad and A flat triad. And I played it for him, and he just lit up. He loved it, right? And he hadn't even heard, like, first of all, I said, Michael, you want to hear the Sega? I assume you're calling me so you can hear the Sega cues because they're all done. He goes, no, don't want to hear them. Just start playing things. So within the first half an hour, I'm playing the verse, The Stranger in Moscow, but playing it the way you play it to write a song. And he just lit up and loved it. So I play it, and the first two, it's E flat, D flat, add 9, F sharp, A flat. It repeats E flat, D flat, add 9, F sharp, A flat. And then the third time, it's E flat, and then the D flat triad goes up, right? And then the F sharp goes up, and then the A flat goes up. And the fourth time is the way it was on the first two, where it's E flat, D flat, add 9, F sharp, A flat. Well, when I got to the A flat, he goes somewhere with it. So I'm holding the triad for the A flat, which is A flat, C, E flat, right? And I release the middle note, which is the C, right? And then drop the bass to an E, and that turns an A flat triad into an E major 7. It's a beautiful way to do a modulation. And I learned all that stuff from Stevie. You do the least amount of movement to get the maximum psychological impact. And that's Stevie, that's done with thirds and sevenths. Now I learned that in music school. Stevie learned it on his own, but thirds and sevenths define everything, right? Not roots and fifths. So all I did was take that A flat triad at the end of the verse, move the C out of it, lift the C note up, and then that A flat and E flat became the major third and the major 7th for an E major 7 chord. So now those two notes that were in A flat triad, which weren't very important, are extremely important for defining the new key, and the new key is E. So I played it, and I went up to the melody that he sings is a melody that I played on the chords. It's a da da da, and then I just went to E. I went to A triad, and now that's Stranger in Moscow. He's just lit up, freaked out. He goes, "That's it, that's it." And it's like the only other thing that was added to that is we went down a whole step. So now it's D major 7 G, right? And finally did a turnaround chord, which is B11, back to an E flat verse, which is a non-standard way to get back to an E flat verse. Normally you do something like a B flat 11, but I went to a B11, right? So, and Stranger in Moscow was done. So we, for the next 45 minutes, we searched for a bridge, couldn't find one. And in the end, Stranger in Moscow is just 2 sections. It's the verse and the chorus. The instrumental, where I'm playing the grand piano part, and the Toto guys are playing this, Lucas is playing that guitar lick, and Steve Picar's playing that sax lick, right? That is just the verse chords, right? And then another interesting thing about Stranger in Moscow is, so there is no bridge, right? It's just verse and chorus. There's only 2 sections. The instrumental is the verse. And so we modulated up a half step like we always do. It's a typical thing to do on a song. And then we're in the studio, and this is the best things, and Michael was so smart about this, the best things in life are accidents, right? When something goes wrong and you seize on it, and you never would have come up with it yourself. So back then we were using 24-track tape machines, and there's a thing called a VSO, which is a variable time knob. So you can make the tape go faster or slower. And most of the time you don't even use it. But we were listening to the song, and we were towards the end of it. We were in E major, right, instead of E flat, because the song had modulated up a half step. And for some reason, the machine slipped down a half step, and it went back to the original key. And Michael lit up, and that's why you have the backwards modulation at the end, where it goes up to E, but then it goes back to the original key instead of modulating higher like most songs do. And that was Stranger Moscow.
Just accident. So
and
with writing the lyrics, is that something Michael does separately, like on his own?
Yeah, that's him. And the lyrics are what he was going through. You know, Armageddon of the brain, the KGB is after me. You know, you can imagine what he was feeling like, how scared he was, right? And so, so writing credit. So it's an hour and a half later at noon, and I'm standing underneath the door, the archway of the door, getting ready to leave, knowing we'd just written a killer song.
Yeah.
And it was so obvious that I was thinking, should I say something? Because I'd only been with him now as his musical director for like 6 months. I'd only been in his band for a year, and I'd only been with him since '89. It's 93, so I'm wearing a bunch of different hats, doing a bunch of things. I'm doing his records. I'm not only in his band, I'm the band leader, you know. And so I was about to say, Michael, did we, and I've said the same thing in other interviews, did we just write a song together? Knowing that, of course, he would have said, yeah, and I didn't do that. He was depressed, and I was just assuming if we did. So I didn't. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. And when you don't do something like that, when you don't seize that opportunity, an artist of that stature is going to disrespect that decision, right? And they're going to realize they can keep the publishing, because Brad wasn't smart enough to know in the industry, this is how it works. You need to speak up immediately. I just didn't know any better. And I was also already really close with them, and I couldn't imagine there would be any problem. Well, in the end, I didn't get any credit on the song, and that's how it went down. When you did, everyone in the industry knows I wrote all the music for the song, so it's not really an issue at all. And I think in Wikipedia it says "Stranger in Moscow," written by Michael Jackson and Brad Buxer, and then it says uncredited. So and that's and so that's how that went down, and it's just one of those things, you know. I'm not going to cry about it. I love the guy to death, and it's like, okay, next, you know, it's like, okay,
fair enough. I mean, I admire that, but
I love Michael. I love Michael. Yeah, I'm so blessed to have had a life with him the way I did, the best 20 years of my life. So that's I'll take that.
Yeah,
I love him. I absolutely adore him. Yeah.
If you had to choose, what would you say is Michael's like definitive best song musically? Whether that's like a song you worked on or not.
The best vocal is "Smile." The best vocal is "Smile." "Billie Jean" is probably the most Michael song I could ever think of.
Yeah.
"Stranger in Moscow," of course, I love, not because I did the music to it, wrote the music to it.
It's a good song. Yeah,
it's one of the most critically acclaimed songs he did. In fact, the critics say the two best songs he's ever did are "Stranger in Moscow" and "Man in the Mirror." Yeah. And other songs that I absolutely love. I mean, the stuff I did with him, like I was mentioning in the Girl, Dave's podcast to start, "Beautiful Girl," "Will You Be There." I love those songs. As far as like songs I'm not crazy about, and I did what I was told and worked on "Childhood," and I hate it. Yeah. And "Speechless" is okay. We did that in 4 hours. We did that in the middle of the night. I think it took 2 hours over the phone. It's like 4:30 in the morning. He's at the ranch and I'm at my house, and 6:30 "Speechless" was done. Let's see. Special songs. "In the Closet" is amazing. That's Teddy Riley, you know. I mean, there's a bunch of songs that I really love, and there's a bunch of songs like "Starting Something" I don't really get, you know. We always do that on tour, and I don't get the lyrics, and I don't really get much of it. "Human Nature" is just gorgeous.
It is. That's
Steve Porcaro. Yeah. So, and the same thing with "Stranger in Moscow" that made it so rich, going from triads in the verse to major 7 chords in the chorus, is what Steve did on the intro to "Human Nature," where the first 2 chords are G to A, and the next 2 chords are F major 7 to E minor 7. So he goes from just triads to major minor sevenths, where you have an added dimension. Where a triad, you don't have a seventh at all, and that's the combinations of chords like that are gorgeous, and that's what Steve did intuitively. So and Human Nature is one of my favorite songs, just unbelievable. I remember the first time I ever heard Human Nature on the radio, I was just freaked out. It was so good. Just like everyone was, right?
It has such an impact, but it's so smooth and kind of effortless. So obviously we mentioned, like, In the Back, Beautiful Girl. Are there any other, like, unreleased songs that you kind of really, really pushed for and wished made the track list? And did you have any say in that?
I got a list, so let me just call it the list, because there's too many for me to not look at without the list. So and of course, whenever you look for something on your phone, it's hard to find. So just give me a second here.
No worries, take your time.
Brad Buxer song list. Okay, so these are the songs I worked on. Faces, What More Can I Give, Rich Girl, Speechless, Stranger in Moscow, Childhood, Money, Little Susie, They Don't Care About Us, Break It Dawn, 2000 Watts, The Lost Children, Hollywood Tonight, The Way You Love Me, Beautiful Girl, In the Back, The Loser, Adore You, Days of Kestrelshire, Children's Holiday, Blood on the Dance Floor, Morphine, Black or White, Jam, Heal the World, Who Is It, Will You Be There, Dangerous, Jungles, Unreleased, which is a great song, Photographs, Unreleased, Colorblind, Unreleased, Best of Joy, DS, Don't Be Messing Around, Ghost, Little Susie, Someone Put Your Hand Out, Place with No Name, Blue Gangster, and this song from Moulin Rouge. So those are the songs at least I have on this list, and that's 40 of them. So as far as songs that I would love to see released, I would love to see Days of Kestrelshire released, The Loser released, Adore You released, Money, not Money, Rich Girl, I'd love to see that released. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that would be great to work on and finish.
So do you have, like, recordings of some of these songs?
That's a sensitive question, so I'm gonna...
Right, okay, no worries, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
And, you know,
the estate has all of my hard drives, right? So the estate has everything in their possession. Yeah.
Oh, so you've kind of worked with them already, in a way.
Well, when this all happened, it's like, you know, I have, in other words, I'm not going to, like, withhold stuff from the estate.
No.
You know, so I made sure that they have everything, right? And they do, but it doesn't mean I don't have those things, right?
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
You know, so.
I'm curious as to, like, how you feel about songs being leaked. Like, is that something you're, like, glad it's out there, or you're indifferent?
Honestly, I don't know how this works. I'd rather the stuff not be leaked, and I'd rather it be properly finished by the people who originally started it.
Yeah.
And
I can imagine.
Rather than, you know, so when the demos are released, I mean, how do I feel about that? I just think it's odd. I don't really feel one way or the other about it. I'm not happy or sad. It's like stuff that I've done with him, and I love the stuff I've done with him. As far as, like, the leakage of it, I really don't care.
No, that's fair enough.
I don't have a feeling about it whatsoever.
Yeah, just you've worked on that. You've got those memories, so
it's just weird. Yeah.
Michael would occasionally take inspiration from other pieces of music. Like, he sampled songs, like in Little Susie. He had different segments in there, and he also recorded covers, like Smile and Come Together. So do you recall any other interesting instances where Michael covered songs or used different segments of songs he was fond of? Maybe some unreleased stuff?
No, we didn't ever sample stuff. And I know with Dr. Freeze, A Place with No Name. Remember the song A Horse with No Name? And that was just a fact. Yeah, Freeze said, we need to hear that sound again, meaning that wonderful vibe of that song. So A Place with No Name sounds exactly like A Horse with No Name, but with different lyrics, right? And Freeze also did Blue Gangster. I worked on both those songs, but those were Freeze's babies. And so that's an example of, you know, a song that's already been done. Michael kind of commandeered and made his own, at least with A Place with No Name. But we didn't sample stuff and put it in music. We made our own samples. We were constantly making our drum sounds, and we never really used a standard drum library, right? Always made our own sounds. But and a lot of those sounds were, you know, like Steve Picaro's axe was the Matrix 12. My axe was the Emulator 3. You know, keyboard players generally have a favorite keyboard, right?
Yeah.
And so mine was always the Emulator 3, which makes no sounds on its own. You have to put the sounds into it. You sample it. But that's what Michael liked, because the sounds were never standard, right? So
Yeah. Like he liked making something completely new, being like innovative.
yeah, so we would sample stuff to make our own loops and stuff like, but we wouldn't sample pieces of songs and put them in.
Right.
We never
Yeah.
did that.
That makes sense. Do any particular songs stand out for either needing like the least amount of work or tweaks, or ones that like really developed and evolved over time?
I mean, oh boy, how do I answer that? Certain songs, all of the songs took a long time to develop, right?
Yeah.
Stranger in Moscow was born in an hour and a half, but we worked on that for the entire time of the history project, right?
Yeah.
For years. In the Back was worked on for years, you know, so they all needed a lot of detail. The reason why I'm answering it this way is because it's not like a given song needs less tweaks or more tweaks than others, but the best songs were the most complicated in terms of detail. And he was the ultimate craftsman, where a lot of times artists will rely on, you know, other producers to do the track, and then they'll just sing on it. And certainly that Michael did a lot of that with Teddy Riley and Rodney Jerkins, where they bring the tracks in. With me, we would do the stuff from scratch. So we would craft each individual sound. He was a great craftsman, right? And so when you're hearing songs like They Don't Care About Us, it's just me and Michael sitting in front of the Emulator 3 day after day after day in the studio, putting little touches on it, you know, little pieces of percussion on it. And so it's not that the song needed tweaks and fixes. It's the development process was extremely complicated in terms of, it wasn't like, there's our drum beat, now let's put the chords down. It wasn't like that. They Don't Care About Us, it's nothing but a drum track. There's not even a bass line on it, right? And the string line is just a Juno 2. It's very thin. And so almost everything you're hearing in They Don't Care About Us is the vocals and the percussion. And that percussion took months and months to do. But it wasn't like needing to fix it. It was just, you just add little pieces to it.
Yeah. Like building it up. Yeah.
Yeah, but like creating a masterpiece painting where each individual brush stroke is really important.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
so yeah. But as far as like, did certain songs need less or more? Some of the songs that weren't particularly great that I worked on, like Speechless, needed very little tweaking, you know, but it's also pretty candy ass, and, you know, it's like not my favorite. But so I think that the best songs, it's not that they needed the most tweaking, but they got the most attention.
Yeah.
And the development was very not intense. It was just a lot of development. Yeah. You know, where it's not just, you're not just throwing a song together in a week, you know, you're developing it over months and months and months.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and putting it on the shelf and going back to another song, and you know, it's like anything else. You can't stay on something indefinitely. So we shift around, move from different song to different song, and that way it was always fresh when we pulled the song back off the shelf. Yeah.
So would the songs, like, if it didn't make one album, would you carry that on to the next? And also, like, would it be as soon as you finish one album, you, like, instantly start work on the next? How would that sort of...
I mean, generally, we'd be touring in between the albums, you know, so you do the Dangerous album, then you tour, right? Then you do the History album, and then you tour. And in between two legs of the History tour, we did Blood on the Dance Floor in Montreux. So that's kind of the rhythm of it. It was only after Invincible that he didn't want to tour anymore.
Right, that makes sense.
Where after we did Invincible, there was no plan. There was no
so
tour.
you just kept going with music. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's all the one-offs. You know, there's the HBO special with Jeff Margolis that never happened, and all the one-offs that fall in '95 before that. You know, we played for 60 minutes, just me and Michael on stage, played for 60 million people on the MTV Awards, right? Where it's just him, but I'm on stage with all of the instant start DATs that were in New York. It was so that every time he would make a move, I would trigger the DAT, and instantly you'd hear certain music associated off his moves. It was that kind of stuff. So what that means is that he was really into, like, he would just stand there on stage doing nothing, and then he'd throw out his arm, and he would want a sound to hit.
Yeah.
Or he'd look over at me, and then we'd start a minute and a half of a given song that we had arranged a certain way just for the MTV Awards, and then that would stop, and then he'd give me another signal and a 10-second blurb of something else. So that was the MTV Awards. And so the only way we were able to do that is we recorded all those individual pieces in the studio, but the only way to trigger those sounds instantly was either put them on a sampler, and back then it wasn't practical to do that. So DAT machines, digital audio tape, were the same spec as CDs. They were 44K, 16-bit, and they were good enough, right, to sound like a record, sort of. And then there was a thing called an instant start DAT, where there was a 2-second buffer time where the start of whatever cue you were doing was actually in RAM. So you could hit a button and the thing would start exactly as you hit it. Right, so I could dance moves. So we had every single instant start DAT machine in New York City, 16 of them. And 8 of them were for the cues, and 8 of them were backups for the first 8. So for some reason, I hit the button on one of the DATs and didn't work, I could instantly do it on the other one. And so but the point is one-offs are where you rehearse to do one thing, like the Elizabeth Taylor thing. That was one-off, where it's just me and him on stage, right? And we did a lot of those. So it's not just touring and record making. It's also doing the single performances where, like it'd be me and Slash on stage with Michael. That was 2003. Yeah. So there'd be all different types of performances and things we put together.
That's really interesting to hear, because I don't know, I guess I always assumed that was just kind of a track that you'd made and Michael would dance to it, not that those cues would happen live.
They were cued up.
I thought Michael did it to the music. Right, that makes sense.
No, I did the music off
of him.
And it's really intense. It's like you're just staring at him, waiting for the next split-second move. It's like, it's pretty intense. Yeah.
So with
the MTV, it was in front of 60 million people live, so it had to be perfect. And they always were. It always was. Yeah, we never made mistakes.
Of course not. I mean, it's Michael Jackson.
You can't make mistakes.
No. Yeah. Over the course of that 20 years, you worked with Michael across loads of different locations, whether that's, Neverland, Vegas, recording studios. How did all these compare? And also, did you continue working with Michael when he was in Bahrain in the 2000s?
Yeah, he called me. He was staying with Prince Abdullah, right? Yeah. And we did Light the Way, which was a song that either Tom Baylor or one of the Baylors did a vocal session at my house. We had 45, 50 vocalists in my house. Oh, wow. And Michael Prince was there. Keith Cohen was the engineer. Michael Prince was running Pro Tools. And we did that over the phone. Yeah. And it was for one of the Hurricane Katrina stuff or one of the natural disasters going on at the time. It was called Light the Way. And and that was in the fall after the trial when he was away in Bahrain. And we worked on that for several months. So, and then he came back and we worked through all of 2007 up in Vegas and worked till the beginning of 2008. Yeah.
So that must be completely different, working over the phone to being in a recording studio to being in Vegas.
We did it so much, it was fine.
Yeah.
We'd work over the phone from the ranch to my house. And so it was fine. He'd sing me parts over the phone and I'd play and we'd be on the phone for 6 hours at a time. Yeah. In fact, sometimes it was so intense, Michael Prince remembers this. Michael would call and I'd tell Michael Prince to answer and tell him I'm at the store. Because I was just like, it's too much.
Just need a break. So, yeah.
Yeah, Michael would say Brad seems to be at the store a lot. But we always got the work done. And working over the phone was, I mean, as long as the work got done, it works. It wasn't less or more. It wasn't better or worse, No. It's just it's the way it was sometimes. A lot of times, like when I'm working on In the Back, breaking down that phone call he sent me, I'm just working. And then we'd be up at the ranch and we'd work on it together. And then I'd be working on it on my own. Yeah. So it's just always different combinations of workflow. And it kind of kept things interesting.
Yeah. Definitely.
I love
Just changing it up a bit.
I love working with him directly, and um, we had the best times of my life doing that. And then when we weren't in the same locale, it was just nice having him on the phone working. So it didn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Let's take a quick break to thank the sponsor of this video, Michael Jackson Market. Michael Jackson Market is a business founded by passionate fans, and they provide you with the opportunity to purchase rare and exciting Michael Jackson memorabilia. They offer subscription boxes which are packed with fun items. Let's check out these new and exciting Michael Jackson subscription boxes by MJ Market, packed with fun and unique items based on Moonwalker, Dangerous, History, Blood on the Dance Floor, and Invincible. Each box comes with a custom t-shirt and 7 or 8 other Michael Jackson memorabilia items. Michael Jackson Market is excited to announce their brand new box themed on Thriller for September, with 2 new t-shirt designs. Complete your wardrobe by ordering each of their latest custom t-shirts individually, or you can add a second one to your Michael Jackson box. So use code REDJACKSON to save $10 off your first Michael Jackson subscription box. Head to www.michaeljacksonmarket.com and follow Michael Jackson Market on Instagram. Thank you once again to Michael Jackson Market for sponsoring this video. And be sure to check out some of their new items, which include a Michael Jackson band box, a Michael Jackson band box for kids, and some items based on Michael's pets. Not only in the studio, you toured with him as his musical director on the Dangerous and History tour, you did the Super Bowl, and there's other performances you mentioned as well. So what exactly did your role entail as musical director? And did you prefer touring or working in the studio? Did touring still give you a chance to write?
Half and half. I love touring, and I love the studio. And Michael would write. Me and Michael would write on the road, right? When we were touring, and the techs would bring an HRS system into my hotel room system, and we had a bunch of gear. So I like that equally. As far as my role as musical director, I did all the arrangements. Okay. Right. I hired and fired the band members. Right. I was in charge. I was the last person, the top person in the chain, as far as I was responsible for how the music sounded, how it was received, how it was mixed. In other words, if the band sounded great, but the mix wasn't good, it was my fault. Yeah. But the mix everything sounded great. Back when I was in Stevie's band, and I was in Stevie's band for 6 years, I would bring a DAT on my keyboard and record each show. And DAT is digital audio tape, right? And back then it was a little cassette. It was about half the size of a regular old-fashioned cassette, right? But it was very clear. And so I'd go back to my hotel room and listen to the whole show and make my parts better and better, right? Yeah, and so constantly tweaking it. When I got in Michael's band, I did the same thing. For the first leg of the Dangerous tour, I'm just the other keyboard player. So I have a DAT on my keyboard recording each show. Go back to the hotel room afterwards, listen to it, and adjust and refine the way I was playing, right? So when I became the musical director after I did the Super Bowl, I didn't have to put a DAT machine on my keyboard anymore. I could get the tapes from front of house, from Trip Caleb. Front of house is the big mixing console in the middle of the stadium, right? And so I get the show tape that Trip had recorded. It was on a DAT, and I'd break it down. And then if I didn't like the way a player was playing a part, I had tremendous relationships with all the players. Each individual player I had super good relationships with. Yeah. And remember, if the boss loves you, everyone loves you. So it wasn't hard. Michael loved what I did, so I got the respect of all the band members. So I'm not going to name persons, but if I didn't like the way somebody was playing a certain part, I just say, "Do you want to hear what you sounded like last night?" And I'd play them, and they'd freak out. Oh my God! And that was fixed, right? Yeah. And as far as the arrangements goes, I would do those in the studio. I'd add parts, and then when I would bring like Blood on the Dance Floor into the live environment, I tell everybody exactly, show them the arrangement, and they'd learn the arrangement. So that's a musical director. That's what a musical director, I do all the arrangements. I'm in charge of the band, and I'm in charge of how the concerts sound. Yeah. I'm in charge of everything that has to do with music. Yeah. And so Michael only spoke to 3 people on tour. It was Karen Faye, hair and makeup, it was Michael Bush, wardrobe, and it was me. Mm-hmm. Michael didn't talk to anyone else. He didn't talk to production. He didn't talk to anybody. So if something went wrong, I'd get a phone call from him. Or if I wasn't around, Michael Bush or Karen Faye were his confidants.
Yeah.
So who go figure, you know, hair and makeup and wardrobe and me. That's who we talked to on tour. Yeah.
Wow. Quite a responsibility then. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, it was easy.
Yeah.
I always tell people, I could do this gig in my sleep.
Yeah.
It's the most easy, natural thing for me on the planet. And I knew exactly how to please him musically and how to, like, I remember when we're done with Morphine and Blood on the Dance Floor in Montreux, and now it's the second leg of the history tour, and I'm here to present Blood on the Dance Floor to him live for the first time. Yeah. And he just said one word to me. He smiled at me, beamed, and he goes, "That is vicious." You know, so he didn't make one change, not only to the arrangement, not one change to the sound, nothing. When he walked out on stage, I hit him as hard as I could with the side fills, tweaking it out, peaking at about 2K, because I know how he hears things and how he wants to be impacted. He wants to feel it. And the arrangement was perfect, and the sonics were perfect, and the band was playing everything that they needed to play. And like with anything live, you have to add extra parts, right? It doesn't, like starting something, if you play starting something live the way you would play it on the record, it would fall flat.
Oh yeah.
So how do you play starting something live? You add a bunch of Stevie licks, keyboard licks. So I'm being very specific. That's you know, with other songs you add a certain extra layers of percussion.
Yeah.
Things like, yeah.
No, that makes sense totally. And you know, while you were on tour with Michael, you did a concert in Brunei, the Royal Brunei concert, and a moment from that show has created a lot of confusion among fans.
It's a breakdown. Tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me. Doggone, breakdown. Brad, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
To be honest with you, what happened is that Saida and Michael are supposed to meet up at the end and come towards each other, and they never did. So I kept the song going, and Michael wanted it to stop. So he goes, "What's he going to do, Brad?" And then the next time I could stop it, I stopped it. And he wasn't mad, nothing. There were times in 20 years I worked with him where he wasn't pleased with something or whatever, or something bothered him. And we talk about it and work it out. Not many times, but that was not one of them. And the internet says I was fired as his music director. Dude, there's not one show that I did not do with him after that point. Yeah. Everybody, you know, you're an expert on Michael. There's not one show that he played while he was alive that I didn't do with him until the time he died. Not one show. So, you know, and everyone knows that on the inside. So I don't know why certain things become so popular on the internet, but you know, it was a nothing. It meant he wasn't mad. It was nothing.
Yeah, it's really strange because like you see this whole thing of Brad, what are you gonna do everywhere, and it's strange how a small moment like that can just be like blown up. Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah. Being associated with Michael Jackson must have been quite a whirlwind. So, just off the top of your head, what sort of, like, maybe particularly funny moments, or maybe, like, scary, intimidating moments, you know, even on tour or something? Like, what sort of things pop into your mind if you had to recall some anecdotes?
At the level I worked at, there's people sometimes around that want you to go away because they're jealous of you. Not band members or anything like that, but it's a pretty cutthroat. And so you have to really be on your guard to survive and not fall into traps. Yeah. You know, to say it's like everything is rosy, it's pretty serious stuff. You know, so I always managed to survive and nothing ever went wrong, but I've had people try to hurt me, you know, and try to get me fired and things like that. And I've always managed to not have that happen. Why? Because I was so close with Michael that it never could. Yeah. Right. So, but yeah, so those are times that could be intimidating. You know, Michael would never get mad at you himself, but if he was unhappy with something, he could have other people make your life pretty miserable.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
So, you know, he's no saint, but I love him to death. But he's a complicated guy, right?
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
So, yeah, I love him.
Yeah.
Funny guy.
In 1995, you rehearsed for the HBO special performance.
Yeah,
And
that was Jeff Margolis.
yeah,
That was pretty. I think that was at the Apollo, right? It was supposed to
yeah,
be
I
at the
think
Apollo
so.
Theater.
And weren't you gonna
Yeah.
like perform
Either that or
songs in a
Radio
totally
City.
different way?
No,
No?
no. We had certain arrangements, but no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
There wasn't like things being around. The choreography. I
Right,
remember
okay.
Jim King and Lori Werner. We had wonderful dancers. The choreography was new.
But the music stayed the same?
Yeah, it wasn't radically different.
Okay.
Yeah, and
That makes
then
sense.
Michael didn't show up for any of the rehearsals.
Yeah,
And then when he finally did, yeah, he was just burnt out because we had done so many one-offs that fall, right?
yeah,
So, and Jeff Margolis is a lovely man, and not having the principal there at the rehearsals, I can't, I became
Yeah.
very close with Jeff because I really felt what he was going through. So we rehearsed without Michael, and then finally Michael showed up, and during Black and White, he fell on the stage and passed out. And then they took him to the hospital, and we never did that. One night only. So
that must have been scary for you then, playing behind him.
yeah,
and
he
seeing
turned
that
white.
happen.
Yeah, he's right next to me on stage, and then he passes out.
What's going through your head in that moment?
I mean, honestly, it's Michael.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if it was. I didn't know what was going on, but nothing surprises me with him. So, I wasn't worried about him dying or anything. He was just, okay, there he is, passed out. Now he's going to the hospital. And
Yeah.
sure enough, we're not going to do the show. That's all I knew. So,
Yeah.
And he just wasn't into doing it.
Yeah.
He had, not because any problem with Jeff Margolis or production. He had just done too much that fall. He was just really wiped out. So
No, that's so understandable. Yeah, I can imagine. Over those 20 years you worked with Michael, would you say the themes of the songs changed a lot? Like, especially in those later years, so much of his work was personal. How did that change?
I mean, the stuff I did with him was just about normal stuff.
Yeah.
Like The Way You Love Me, or Stranger in Moscow, or, none of the stuff had any heavy thematic or super heavy meaning. I mean, take a song like Will You Be There? It's one of the best gospel songs I've ever heard in my life, and it was done in the most non-standard way on the planet. He tells a poem at the end, and we do the whole song with synthetic samples and put the choirs on it. It's the most soulful thing on the planet. Where normally you think if you're doing that, you'd have to have all live musicians and it'd be organic.
What he did helps the dynamic.
A lot of times, a combination of just really strange elements gives you the most magic. So, so I think I'm straying from the question. What then was the question again that you asked?
Just about how the themes of the songs evolved and
how
personal
they
were.
changed.
I mean, something
honestly,
like Will You Be There is so different from like Morphine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when we did Morphine and Montreux, he's writing a love song about Demerol.
Yeah.
And none of us knew what was going on. It was just four of us out there. It was Matt Carpenter on Pro Tools. Mick Kozowski was the lead engineer because Michael had a falling out with Bruce for a minute. Matt Ford's the assistant engineer, me the musician, right? And so all of us are in this one room in the studio shouting Morphine under Michael's direction. And that's on the record. And, the classical part that I wrote for that, the piano part where he's in the emergency room, he's singing about Demerol, right?
Yeah.
So none of us thought one way or the other about it because he was so clear on all of his sessions.
Yeah.
If somebody's not clear, people working around him are going to know it. He was completely clear. There was no problem whatsoever. So in answer to your question, based on what he was going through, that came through in his music, and we didn't know that he loved Demerol at that time, but it's coming through his music. When we were doing the Invincible album, unlike the History album, he was not very hands-on. He didn't show up each day, and he was in a really dark space. And with that being said, that's the closest I ever was to Bruce and Michael. So go figure that.
Yeah.
But he just wasn't present for the song. But I've never been closer with Michael and with Bruce during the Invincible project. We did that at Criterion. We were staying at the Sheraton Bal Harbor for a year or two in Miami. Yeah. And Criterion is the Germano Studios, you know, the Hit Factory people, Eddie Germano, yeah, Troy, Danielle. So, yeah, so, you know, as things would change in his life, the music, like for instance, in Invincible, I worked on 5 tracks, but he only wrote 2 new tracks on that album, right?
Yeah.
Which was the Lost Children and Lost Children and Speechless, right? And I could be wrong. I don't know. There's so much music in my head and so many things we did.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But like on the History album, he's there every single day.
Yeah.
You know, comes in at noon, we work till 6, I stay at the studio and he goes home, right? So as far as thematically, based on what he was going through, I mean, it's 2004, we're doing the best work we've ever done.
Yeah.
He had a trial coming up. I can't imagine how scared he was, and we're doing the best stuff we've ever done in our lives. So did it mean the stuff was dark? No. Days of Gloucester is about love.
Yeah.
You know, Beautiful Girl's about being in love with a beautiful girl. You know, In the Back is about being persecuted by bad people, right?
Yeah.
So it had all the dimension of multiple things, but it wasn't like, you know, did the music all of a sudden start to stylistically go to a certain style that it wasn't before? No, it was, for the most part, it's just R&B pop.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It almost sounds as if like the music kind of kept him going and motivated him.
Yeah, he loved music. And
Yeah.
up at the ranch, you know, Brad Sundberg is one of my best friends. I do seminars with Brad all over the world.
Yeah.
I love Brad. Brad did all the music that you would hear. You go to the ranch, you'd hear Michael. Wasn't that Michael loved classical music? He loved romantic music, the Romantic era, the 1900s.
Nice.
Yeah. Debussy and Ravel, and he loved that stuff. And that's all you would hear playing through the speakers. Yeah. And so instantly, as soon as you were on property, you'd hear wonderful music coming out of the trees and rocks, and it was all outside.
Yeah.
And Michael just loved music. And Michael we also, you know, we'd be in the dance studio, and you know, Michael would study the Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. He'd study the classics of those dancers. And you know, remember, Michael wasn't just the best dancer of all time. He wrote all those steps. He wrote the moonwalk, and he invented that stuff. So, and nobody's ever done that. And where did he learn to do that? 2 places. He was born with it, and he studied. That's the second thing. He studied all the original great people.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like a lot of it was so organic with him as well. And
yeah.
You said Michael was a bit less present with Invincible. So you wouldn't say that was like him being less passionate or anything. Was that just him being busy?
That was him not being, I don't want to say things that I don't know for sure, but he didn't seem as clear as normal.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
He seemed very dark. You know, one time we had a meeting with me, Rodney Jerkins, and Teddy Riley, and it was just a meeting to see how everyone's doing. It's just us. And his eyes, I don't know if you've ever seen the video of Blood on the Dance Floor, but it's one of the coolest videos he ever did. You know how his eyes look where they're almost shut? Yeah. How dark he looks? And Michael hated that video. And Michael Jackson, I've never seen him look cooler. That's the way he looked at the meeting. Where his eyes were almost so shut, they were almost slits. And, you know, that's reminiscent of other things going on in your life. So without stating things, I'll just leave it at that. But, you know, it was pretty dark, and he was real serious at that meeting. And, you know, he liked everything we were doing. So there's no problems or anything, but just never remembered how dark he looked. And it's exactly how he looks in Blood on the Dance Floor. The coolest Michael you could ever see. But a lot of times, like, cool means dark, you know?
Yeah.
Cool doesn't mean like lollipop.
No.
Cool, usually cool is dark.
I know what you mean. But that was never something that, like, you know, you sort of asked him about, or like you were concerned about. That was just kind of his thing. You stick to the music. Yeah,
I just do what I'm supposed to do and be his friend and do music. And like I said, the relationship had never been better. So,
Let's just hop back to the 90s just for a moment, where you were on set for the Ghosts short film.
Yeah.
Can you just share that experience with us, please? Like, what was your role,
I gotta be
and
honest
what
with
were
you.
those memories?
Stan Winston, who, you know, did all the robotics and AI, you know, he's a genius.
Yeah.
And I think he's actually a makeup artist. That's a title that he is. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if I'm getting this right, but he
Pretty
does the
sure.
most elaborate science fiction robotic stuff. I've never seen anything like it. He's the very top guy. He was the one who directed Ghost. So Ghost was all done in basically the same room. So
Yeah.
it's not like we were going on different locations. And that was the first time I realized how boring it is watching something being filmed. You know, you
Yeah.
do scene that take after take after take, and it was just exhausting. You know, there was no glamour in it at all. And so what was I doing? I was on a platform on wheels with my emulator, with
Yeah.
sound from the emulator that I could, and speakers, loudspeakers, where when Michael was doing something, he needed certain sounds I could do. And I was the only musician on that set. And I did, in other words, I was the musical director on that film. So we took the song Too Bad and made a bunch of different versions. And then we used Is It Scary and stuff like that.
Yeah, get it? Get here. Shit. 20 people here. No music here. Bum, 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 bum.
And so I was in charge of doing the music for it. And then Nicholas Pike, I think, was the composer. And there was one other guy, I forget. But yeah, I mean, it took him 5 hours to get in character for the mayor. It took him 5 hours for them to put the prosthetics on him. And he was unrecognizable. And it was a fun thing to do. But again, it just, I didn't realize until I actually saw something being made like that, how tedious and time consuming it is. It was like, yes, interesting. So
I can imagine. So was that like the whole thing of Michael does a dance move, you do like that sort of hit on the music? Is that sort of what it was?
I remember, just aside, Michael's mother was there a lot watching the film. Yeah, that was kind of cool. But yeah, I do. It wasn't anything that was like when we would practice for the one-offs, right? Everything was exact, right?
Yeah.
Like Liz Taylor, the thing we did was like so rehearsed. You know, we recorded an orchestra, and then I'm on stage with him and the keyboards and the samplers, and I have to do exact cues at the exact moment. With this, it wasn't like that. It was just Michael would say, "Okay, Brad, I need this."
Yeah.
And so he'd be doing a scene, and I'd give him some sounds.
Yeah, totally.
So it's more casual. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that a thing of like when Michael would dance like that? Would he want the music like blasted real loud?
Oh yeah. When I would do the arrangements like for Dangerous, I'd go to the dance rehearsals and map out where all the hits were. Meaning I'd watch the accents of the dancing. Yeah. And you know, write it out in legit notation, the accents and stuff like that, and then do the arrangements around that. So Michael could kind of lean on the beat because I knew his dancing dictated the rhythm. Yeah, and the arrangement. And none of it's hard. It's all obvious. It's like, you know, you want the artist's movement to translate into the arrangement so that he can throw his arm out and he's going to hear a big old accent, right? Yeah. Yeah, just obvious, simple stuff like that. But he loved it and it worked.
Yeah, and watching Michael, I think that just makes him and his moves both seem so powerful as well. Gives him such like an aura about him, you know?
Yeah, magic. Yeah.
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 Back to like the later years, have you heard rumours that Michael was planning to create an album of classical music towards the later period of his life?
Yeah,
I know. Involved with that?
I know he was thinking about doing that. But I wasn't involved with that, and it never happened. So I don't know. You know,
that was like something he wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you recall any other sort of like big plans he had that never came to fruition? No.
No,
he was just.
There were things that he wanted to do that didn't come. He wanted to buy a 747, and
really?
I told him don't do that because you won't be able to afford to keep it up. You know.
Yeah.
He always wanted a roller coaster for his ranch that he never got. Right.
Who doesn't? Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of things he wanted that he always wanted to do movies. We a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, Sion Chafin, who's married to David Fincher. Hooked me up with Robert Kraft, right? And Michael wanted to do the music for a film that they were doing. I think The Thin Red Line, and so Hans Zimmer was in the studio with that. And Michael always wanted to do movies, and he wanted the Peter Pan movie. Didn't get it. He wanted Powder, which he would have been great at. He didn't get it. And when he couldn't get the movies, because Janet was getting movies and he wanted more than anything to act. When he couldn't get that, that's when he decided he wanted to start doing soundtracks for movies. So, you know, and in the end, with the things that went on with his life, you know, after the trial, he's in Bahrain, we're not even working for 2006, stuff like that, you know, things got put on hold that would have been pursued more aggressively.
Yeah, so, totally.
Yeah.
I hear that he wanted to play Spider-Man or something as well, like so many just like completely different out there things.
It was the Green Hornet. And we had worked on, he had me doing a bunch of music for the Green Hornet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's really interesting. And then obviously in 2009, Michael went on to do This Is It. First off, did you have any involvement at all with that? And then if not,
here's how it worked.
Yeah.
I decided to I've always been a pilot. So Michael, in 2007 when we're working, Michael's really in debt, right? Yeah. And he owes about $475 million, right? And nobody's getting paid. I was getting paid, but the security wasn't getting paid. They haven't been paid in 5 months, and it was pretty ragged, right? And things looked like they were kind of falling apart. So I went, and I was 49 then, and I decided to see if I could get hired as an airline pilot, because I had all the ratings. When he went off to, when the trial happened, he went off to Bahrain. I went and got type rated in a jet, meaning I learned how to fly a commercial airliner, because I already had all the other ratings, because I always loved flying. So while people aren't getting paid, and it's 2007, and we're working on stuff up in Vegas, but it was just weird. It wasn't the same vibe. You know, we're doing not so much songs, but just kind of doing music, and I wasn't really sure what it was for. So I went and got hired at an airline September 19th, 2007, right? And I got hired, and I couldn't work with them for a few months because I was in training, and you're in full-time training. When I started flying in November, I was going back and forth to Vegas, right? Working with him and then going back and flying my 4-day trips. Right. And he didn't like that. And one time I'm in Vegas and Michael Prince is with me, and we're in a casino, right? And Michael's on the phone with me for 20 minutes begging me to quit the airlines. You know, and I knew if I had done that, you can't quit an airline and get rehired at another airline. It's really frowned upon, right? Yeah. And also I'm 49, I'm not 25, right? So that was pretty old back then for becoming an airline pilot. So I told him I couldn't quit. Yeah, I can't do it. And
I don't think many people would kind of have the nerve to stick with, you know, what you want to do and kind of say no.
Well, here's the thing. Things weren't very healthy. In other words, he was tremendously in debt. Nobody's getting paid. I'd already been with him for 20 years, had the best 20 years of my life. And it's like, I kind of knew him pretty well. And it's like something wasn't quite right. Yeah. And I decided not to quit. So I stayed on. So at any rate, last time we worked together was at the beginning of 2008, right? Okay. And then he started preparing for the tour, right? And we know what happened after that. The tour didn't happen, and he tragically died. So, you know, it's just one of those things where I think that sometimes it's, you know, you make certain decisions, sometimes not even knowing why you're making them, but sometimes knowing it's the right thing to do. And I think that's what I did. You know, if I had said, yes, I'll quit the airline to be with you, of course I would have done the tour. He goes, I don't want to work with anybody but you. And Michael Prince is right there with me, right? So, and the conversation was for 20 minutes, but I couldn't quit the airline and just like act like
just everything. Give up all that.
Yeah. So I stayed with the airline, and that's the decision I made. And you know, he on the band that he got with, none of the players were used except for Jonathan Moffat. Jennifer Batten wasn't there, Freddie Washington, nobody. So it was a new band, and you know, it never happened. You know, never happened. Yeah. So it's very, very tragic, and so. You know.
But Michael never tried like calling you back once This Is It happened. There was just nothing.
Well, I think that there had been months where we hadn't talked, and then when I found out about it, it's like, okay, and you know, he didn't reach out to me. No, and there's nothing I could really do about it. So
No.
They did their rehearsals, and then he had that terrible day where he didn't make it, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I could have held on to that gig easily just by quitting the airlines and
Yeah.
staying on with them, but I didn't. You know,
Yeah.
so that's how it happened. Yeah.
Was becoming a pilot something like you'd always wanted to do? Was that like some big ambition
My
you
last
had?
year, I got a music degree in jazz performance in 1980. I'm 66, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm really old. So my last year of college, I got a private rating because I always loved flying. And then I got an instrument rating and a commercial rating. And then when I was done with college, I played in the band for a couple of years, and then that did well. And then I went to LA and didn't know how I was going to make a living. So I got a CFI, was Certified Flight Instructor rating, and a CFII, an instrument instructor rating, and taught for about 9 months that first year in 1984. But immediately I got work. The first year I was out there with a guy named Matthew Wilder, who had a hit called Break My Stride, and we were on all these national TV shows that year in 84.
Yeah.
And like back before your time, like Solid Gold, American Bandstand, Soul Train, all those.
Yeah.
And then in 85, I met Stevie's people and started working on Stevie's albums. In 86, I started touring with Stevie. So that's how that timeline went.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I didn't fly for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
I had these ratings, didn't fly. And then when Michael had his trial, you know, J-Lo was up at my house that whole summer, right? I had moved out of my house that summer. I think it's 2004. And the trial was 2005, and January 31st it started. So it's 2004. So J-Lo's at my house, mainly because I think Michael put her there. I'm not sure how that happened, but it was a Sony thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that was fine. And when Michael had his trial, which started at the last real work we did is at the end of 2004. Now it's 2005. Trial starts in late January. So we did a Geraldo Rivera. Geraldo Rivera came over to my house with Michael in January.
Yeah.
We did that interview that you see, right?
I've seen it.
And Randy Jackson, Michael's brother, was there with us. Michael Prince is in there, right?
Yeah.
And we did that. And then while Michael was doing his trial, we didn't really work on music. A couple times I went up to the ranch and we did stuff. So now we're done with it. Evie calls me and says, Michael's been acquitted on everything, and, you know, it's all in the news. So I'm thinking, oh, my God, we can get back to work. He goes to Bahrain.
Right.
And so
okay.
I didn't know what to do. Going with another artist isn't going to please him. You know, I've been with him for all this time. So I decided to go get type rated in a commercial airliner, right?
Yeah.
So I got 2 more ratings, a multi-commercial rating and then a MEI multi-engine instructor rating, and then got type rated in a CRJ, which is a passenger jet.
Yeah.
It's called CL65 rating. And then did all that and then went back to work for Michael, right? And all of 2007, we're working. And now it's towards the end of 2007 where things aren't great. And I decided I wanted to see if I could get hired. I got hired.
Yeah.
And I think it was a really smart decision I made. It just felt like I needed to be able to do it. You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just,
I get
you know,
mean.
and I love it. So why did I like flying? The entire time we were touring, right? Not just with Michael, but with Stevie, but especially with Michael, we're on DC-10s and 747s when we're flying Part 121, which is commercial. When we're flying Part 91, that's a DC-8, where you're basically on your charter jet. Regardless, the pilots always were happy. They never brought their work home with them. And I grew up with a dad who was a doctor, who was always stressed out. Lawyers are stressed out. Yeah. Pilots aren't stressed. And I always noticed that they were happy. And I always noticed that. And so it just sort of made sense that, you know, I needed to do something in case, you know, I just decided I wanted to see if I could get hired. So I got my rating, finished rating, and got hired. And, you know, I've been at the airline I'm at for 18 years now and absolutely love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Good for you. That's
yeah, it's short hair.
Yeah.
I don't have that long blonde hair on history tour, so you have to have short hair. But yeah, it's everything's worked out.
Yeah.
So, but the best 20 years of my life were with Michael.
Oh yeah.
No doubt about that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting that was just kind of, you know, it wasn't one moment that completely made you sort of pursue that. It was just kind of something you've been thinking about for a while, and then it felt like the right time.
If like let's say you're in a situation with a new president like Barack Obama, like everything seems perfect. And then let's say you're in a situation with a president that not to name any names, but was popular, isn't so popular,
Yeah.
and it's just sort of going south. So people don't really know what to think of the principal anymore. They're worried about him a little bit, and the financial picture isn't good, and so it's not a perfect situation. So you look at other situations. You got to be, you got to be careful in life, and so you want to backup plans in case this doesn't work. And so I did what I did. But I've had the best of both worlds, and because the first job I ever had was when I was 49, right? I've never had a job in my life. It's always been music with Michael and Stevie. It's like, rather than being burnt out now, and at 66, a lot of people are burnt out and they want to retire and travel. I'm like completely fresh. I work as much as I can. I'm happier than I've ever been, more productive. And, at my company, I'm doing all their videos, and I'm doing, I'm their creative person. So, I mean, I'm an airline instructor. I'm a standards instructor. But what I'm saying, I do all their creative stuff too.
Yeah. So do all the people
in 4 days,
were... Sorry,
in
go
4
ahead.
days, I bring all my video gear up and Pro Tools, and we'll record their podcasts and do their films, and then put them together and add music to them. And I've been doing that for years now. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do all the people you work with at the airline know that you were like Michael Jackson's right hand man?
Everyone
Cool.
knows. Everyone knows me. Yeah.
Is that something like people ask about, or do they just kind of like?
No, it's funny because the reason why I'm really happy, and Sam knows this, is because I have the most amazing friends at my gig, at my airline, right? They love me and I love them back. And it's like, there's not a better feeling in the world than being around people who really, really like you.
Yeah.
So
100%.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful gig.
That's awesome. Good for you. Now, before we start wrapping up, I just want to go back to that final session you had with Michael in 2008. Can you just talk to me a bit about that session?
Which session are you referring to?
The final one you did with Michael.
So, I don't know if I want to say it was the best session we've ever done together.
Really?
Yeah. It was kind of like a party.
Okay.
So, I'm not going to go into it completely, but me and Michael are working. What?
Give us a little hint.
It was, I don't know, but Lavelle's on the phone, right?
Yeah.
Me and Michael are working together in a room, and Lavelle's on the phone, and it was the funnest time I've ever had with Michael. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that.
It's a personal memory.
Yeah. In the future, when I feel a little more comfortable, I'll talk about it. There's nothing dark. It was just it's just two really good friends.
Yeah.
Having a blast. Yeah. So.
Totally.
Yep.
That's wonderful. I mean, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure just speaking with you, and it's been so interesting. I mean,
well, thank you, Brad.
Honestly, it means the world. Thank you, Brad.
Well, it's been a pleasure for me too. Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to mention to the fans? Do you have something you want to say, or do you have any seminars coming up? Anything like that?
Yeah, I'm in Paris with Michael Prince in February. We're doing two things. I think we're doing Abbey Road Institute, and we're also doing a MJ seminar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brad, it was great. It was great working with you, and we'll do this again. Okay.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.